This is quite wonderful. Sarah Jaffe is appearing for the first time in Noon this year. Her writing has also been published recently in 14 Hills, Invisible Ear, and Skane. She is the editor of The Art of Touring, a collection of writing and visual art by musicians, available from Yeti Publications. She plays a treble heavy guitar and teaches various forms of writing. She lives in Brooklyn.
This piece is called I Was a Neat Check. I was a neat check in a seamless box, a slash bridging the box's diagonal. I was dragon sure those days. Nothing small could stop me. I believed in promptness as a virtue, no, a coin of certitude. If the clock struck 8 when I was in the room, it would strike through me, shore me, and I would notch into place. Slash.
Dylan Nice made his first appearance in Noon last year. He grew up in the Allegheny Mountains and now lives in Iowa. His work has appeared or is forthcoming from Noon, Unsaid, Quick Fiction, and Dewclaw.
Humor is always my defense mechanism in situations like these. I try to read something funny. But tonight I'm reading something that's decidedly unfunny, so maybe if some of you could laugh inappropriately. All right, this is a story from Noon this year called Ice Flow. It's semi-autobiographical. It's kind of about an existential crisis. Okay. The girls talked of weddings and vacations, and Tom sat against the red wall at the end of the booth and said nothing. One girl sat across from him, but she had her head turned toward the other people. Her hands were small with unpainted nails, and she kept them still on the table. It was calming how small her hands were. She and the girls were students with Tom at a big university with plain buildings along a river. The girl with the small hands talked fast. She had fair skin and dark hair, which she kept short. Her teeth were round in the way Tom thought girls' teeth were. She was engaged and wore a diamond ring with red stones around it. The wedding would be in the summer, on the coast in the north. It was going to be in a white house with the gray of the ocean worn into it. The girls asked her questions. She smiled and answered them simply. He listened to the music and was angry for having nothing to say to her or the other girls. After a while, he heard them talking about going to another bar. Other students walked in polos or cocktail dresses because it was warm. There was enough wind that the clouds moved fast above the buildings. The town was on the plains, and the flatness there changed the shape of the sky. It had been smaller at home. The wind felt different coming in from all that emptiness out there. It was as though he were standing at the spot where the world began to get round. He was exposed. Tom walked slower so he could be close to the engaged girl. He walked just behind her and watched the light from the street lamps and what it did on her hair. "Why are you quiet tonight?" the girl, Elsie, said. "I try to think of things to say, but nothing so far," Tom said. "And why do you think that is?" Elsie said. "I'm not sure. Everyone is talking so much." She was quiet after this, but Tom didn't try to understand why. When he did talk, he didn't like the things he said. Before coming here, he'd lived in a place that was stale and scattered through the woods. Tom was used to people there talking slowly about serious things. Men sat at dark stained tables with smoke hanging in front of them. They said things that sounded like scripture, like it had all been thought about for a long time and decided upon. Outside, she walked beside him, but quiet now. The sidewalks were lit with orange lights, and colored signs in the windows. There were brick streets in the buildings and buildings with paintings on the walls. The paintings were of children sometimes, or mountains and landscapes with something like a man or an airplane to show you how big everything was. Tom felt good looking down at her while she walked beside him. He liked seeing her hair and the curve of her neck. He liked not seeing her face, but only remembering it for now. The next bar had holes in the ceiling and wires hanging out. The girls took a booth and two guys came over from the bar. They wore bright shirts with buttons and styled their hair. Tom was against the wall and across from Elsie again. He knew she was a girl who would answer his questions with other questions. She would want an example of what he was saying. He would try and talk about cloudy, vague things. He made a fog to cover everything but just the edges of something incredible or terrible happening. He remembered the news stories he saw earlier and how Elsie might be interested. The story was about a baby born with 6 fingers on each hand. The doctor in the story said the fingers on this baby were so perfect, it was a long time before anyone noticed them. Will they remove them? Elsie asked. No, Tom said. His hands are more perfect than ours. 6 fingers is the stronger gene. It's only that it's rare. Then how is it stronger? She said. Because those who have it will pass it on. His father had them too, but not as perfect as this. He would make an excellent piano player, she said. Tom said an absolutely perfect person would have 6 fingers on each hand. He said Adam and Eve would have had that. I don't see why that's true, she said. Why you'd want to put it like that? It's better to have a name for things, he said. Tom drank from his beer and knew he couldn't make this a different kind of conversation. He had wanted to talk, but this talking was bad, and it always turned out that way. You always talked until it got bad and you decided to quit. Elsie smoothed her hair and looked toward the end of the booth, waiting for someone to ask her a question she could smile at and talk about. He knew what she thought. Things were just stone or water or plastic, just organs and bones. She was able not to care and smile about it. Tom thought everything was still the nothing it used to be. This was the elegance that made sense and was beautiful. There are true things, Tom said. Things that are true that can't be argued to. Like what? She asked and looked at him. I don't know, he said. He told her she should show more grace. She only thought cold ideas. Then he was surprised to see her act hurt in front of everyone. Tom hadn't argued, she said. He'd hurled insults. I feel like I could talk to you about anything, she said. He didn't know what she meant. He felt embarrassed about something. It was a lie or a mistake. He apologized again, and Elsie rubbed his arm quickly, saying it was okay. That she would touch him was strange to Tom. His apartment was warm, but he felt chills that started on his back and then crawled across his arms and chest. He heard people. Students walked and vomited in the brick alley behind his apartment. There were clips of words, fragments of people talking or arguing. One girl and a boy stopped below his window to talk in low voices. He thought he could hear their clothes touching. She laughed. His dreams were fast and blurred. Elsie was in one of them with her fiancé, and they were walking. The fiancé told Tom she always argued and he shouldn't worry. Tom's dreams changed, but he would wake up in the dark and lie there. His body felt smooth and tired. The chills came again, but they felt good now, cold and crawling from somewhere in the sheets. He dampened the sweat. The sky outside his window was getting lighter. He was going to call Elsie, but now it was too early. He waited and then decided to walk and think of things to say. He walked a sidewalk that led down to a bridge. There were chunks of ice coming down the river, sections of ice that had broken free during the warm day before. They slid down the water fast, showing how fast the water always moved, but didn't look it because it was so smooth and brown. Below him, chunks of ice slammed together. Pieces stopped and were hit by other pieces. Tom stood there on the bridge a long time, watching. He finished crossing the bridge and started into a park. The grass was still brown, but the big trees were beginning to show buds. He tried to imagine the place Elsie must be from. There were probably rows of houses on long, neat streets. People passed Tom on the walkway. some with dogs, others with their husbands or wives. They wore brown coats, and a few of them had glasses. Their clothes were made of washed-out colors, and the people smiled when he passed. They lived in houses somewhere, washed and clipped things off themselves. He felt his finger damp against his denim jeans. What they got on the things they touched, they washed off again. They still touched their fabric and the dirt. Some of them had their hands on each other. Thanks.
That was like scripture. It's hard to move on, but we will. Tao Lin has been a frequent contributor to Noon. He is the author of 6 books of fiction and poetry, including the forthcoming novel Richard Yates, which will be published in September by Melville House and includes work first published in the current and 3 previous editions of Noon. He lives in Brooklyn. He'll be reading Don't Hit Your Head from our anniversary issue.
Thank you for publishing me and having me read tonight, Diane. Don't hit your head. Don't hit your head, he said on 6th Avenue near 9th Street. He touched her a little and she screamed. He stopped walking and watched her cross the street. He walked to her and put his hand on her shoulder. Don't fucking touch me, she said. I'll kill you. He laughed a little and felt sad. They turned onto 11th Street and walked half a block. They stopped walking. Don't laugh at me, she said. This is funny, he said, grinning. Why don't you have a sense of humor right now? It won't be funny when you're afraid to sleep tonight, she said. I probably won't sleep tonight, he said. A few minutes later, he put his arms around her without touching his body to her body. After a while, he stepped back and looked at her. She was staring at the sidewalk. People walked past sometimes and turned to look at them. About half the people were walking small dogs on leashes. He said something, and she said, "Shut the fuck up." He walked away from her and looked around. He took her digital camera from his duffel bag and took a photo of her. Don't fucking take my pictures, she said, and slowly turned in place away from him. He sat on steps and took out his cell phone and looked at it and put it back in his pocket. He took out a small journal and looked at it. He put it back in his pocket. He walked to her and put his hand on her shoulder at approximately 33 West 11th Street and said, "Don't hit your head." He laughed a little more and felt sadder. Thank you.